Welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today I'd like to continue following up on some of the info and perspectives that have come in through the comments section in recent weeks. This week I'd like to focus a little more on the 2020 album, which was discussed in episodes 228 and 229. Before we get to that, I also wanted to let you know that part 4 of my informal discussion of weird Beach Boys tracks with Betamax Blocker is up on Betamax Blocker's channel here on YouTube. Please check it out if you get a chance. He's got a lot of great content on that channel. I think you'd enjoy it. Again, that's Betamax Blocker here on YouTube. Starting with episode 228, 2020 side 1, there were a lot of people who pointed out that in discussing Do It Again's place in Beach Boys history, while it only went to number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100, it went to number 1 in the UK. Among those reminding me of that fact were Jack Morrow, Chris Rainbow, Richard Taskin, Raymond Gill, Robert Kaufman, Daniel Reed, and John Hammond. Raymond Gill also pointed out that on August 31st, 1968, when Do It Again topped the UK chart, it was in a three-way tie with the Bee Gees' I've Gotta Get a Message to You and Herb Alpert's This Guy's in Love with You. John Hammond, who was there, shares an interesting theory on why Do It Again only topped the UK chart for 1 week. John says it was played on the popular music show Top of the Pops, which generated a massive demand for the record. In his estimation, it may have generated too much demand, since he recalls that the 4 record shops in his town sold out and didn't expect it back in stock for at least 7 days. It hit so big in the first week that by the second week, there just weren't enough copies available to keep it at number 1. In fact, he points out, where most number 1 songs usually drop to number 2, Do It Again dropped to number 3 after its week at number 1. It seems they might have been a little unprepared for that level of success. Do It Again also went top 10 in Canada, Ireland, Norway, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, South Africa, Japan, Australia, and probably some other places as well. Additionally, as Robert Kaufman pointed out, while Billboard put it at number 20 in the U.S., rival U.S. publications Cashbox placed it at number 8, and Record World put it at number 7. Also, in the comments on episode 228, 2020, side 1, be sure to check out Lamont South's great recollections of seeing the Beach Boys with opening act Paul Revere and the Raiders at the Lagoon in Salt Lake City in 1969. There's some great details and interesting info about the show and the history of the Lagoon as a concert venue. In episode 229, 2020, side 2, when discussing the Beach Boys' March 19, 1969 appearance on the Kraft Music Hall, I mentioned that some sources say the group were shown performing California Girls and I Can Hear Music. Having watched what I believe to be the entire show, I found only California Girls with a very quick video clip of the group obviously performing I Can Hear Music, appearing only under the Beach Boys' introduction at the top of the show. Once again, Lamont South came through with some great information. He was a member of the Beach Boys fan club at the time, which, he reminded us, cost $2 a year in those days. Ahead of the Kraft Music Hall appearance, fan club members received a 5x7 card in the mail with a picture of the band minus Brian, inviting them to tune in to see the group perform their new single, I Can Hear Music, on the Kraft Music Hall. Having received the card, Lamont says he was surprised when he tuned in and found they did California Girls instead. This seems to bear out my guess that I Can Hear Music was taped and then cut before broadcast. Having alerted the fan club about the new single being featured, I'm also thinking I was right in my guess that the Beach Boys were probably not thrilled about the new song being cut from the show. Thanks for that information, Lamont. There's nothing like having confirmation from somebody who was there and paying attention back in the day. Also, in discussing the 2020 album, I asked whether anybody had definitive information on whether the Lickety Splits verse and the line about a summer's day out in California in the song Cotton Fields had come from the Beach Boys. Joel Reiner pointed me to Disc 2, Track 17 of the Hawthorne, California collection, Dennis Introduces Cotton Fields. In it, Dennis says, among other things, that Al changed the words around. Nobody has yet come up with any instances of those lyrics appearing outside the Beach Boys versions, so I'd have to conclude from that those lyrics came from Al. Orby fan let me know that the album version of Cotton Fields was released as a single in the Netherlands in 1969. The B-side was Time to Get Alone. He also let me know that it had spent 8 weeks in the Dutch Top 40, peaking at number 12 on September 13, 1969. According to the information I could find, the Dutch single was released in August 1969, the same month Al was recording the second version of Cotton Fields, which would be released as a single in most of the world in 1970. Seemingly, the second version was not released as a single in Holland, which is kind of understandable since they'd already released the album version as a single a few months earlier. Of course, we'll talk more about that second version of Cotton Fields when we get to 1970. Strad 2097 let me know that the Redwood recording of Time to Get Alone was officially released in 1993 on Celebrate, the Three Dog Night Story, 1965 through 1975. As Strad mentions, it seems likely that the basic track was used in the Beach Boys recording. I haven't been able to confirm if some of the Beach Boys version came from the work Brian did with Redwood, or if their version is a complete remake. If anybody knows definitively, please pass it along. Hello Mate let me know that while the gatefold on the US version of 2020 has the photo of Brian pivoted, the UK version has it properly aligned, and I have to say it looks much better that way. As has been mentioned before, the back cover of the UK version also has a track listing, which would have been helpful on the US version. Also on episode 229, 2020 Side 2, I really appreciated Burlington Bill's comments on the impression that 2020 would have made on Beach Boys fans when it was new in 1969. Bill pointed out that while songs like I Went to Sleep and Time to Get Alone are beautiful, they would have been distinctly underwhelming to fans who, in 1969, were still hoping for the Beach Boys to return to form and create the next Good Vibrations. Bill also talked about the difficulty in understanding the way the songs on 2020 would have come across in 1969 for those of us who first heard it years after and are judging it through the lens of much more mediocre albums that were to follow. I'm sure he's right. Albums that might have disappointed and ranked toward the bottom of the Beach Boys catalog in the late 60s are undoubtedly ranked much higher after some of the albums of the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. I've paraphrased his comments, of course. You can check out Bill's original comments on episode 229. I hope I caught the gist of it and did justice to Bill's thoughts on this. Thanks for passing it along, Bill. In discussing Breakaway in episode 231, Joel Goldenberg and Robert Kaufman brought up the many and varied versions of the song that have been released over the years. It merits a more detailed discussion than I can do here. I've made a note and hope to devote a full episode to it one of these days. In the meantime, you can check out Joel Goldenberg's excellent breakdown and analysis of the various versions of Breakaway in the comments on episode 231. Thanks for that, Joel, and also to Robert and everybody who brought up those alternate versions. Michael the Movie Addict pointed out something I'd missed. Session vocalist Ron Dante sang lead on 2 top 10 singles in the fourth quarter of 1969. The number 9 Tracy by studio group The Cufflinks and the number 1 Sugar Sugar by studio group The Archies. In episode 226, featuring Carl Wilson Part 7, discussing Carl's guest vocal on Elton John's Since God Invented Girls, I mentioned that I thought the lyric might have lent itself better to a campy rocker. Mike Sajecki commented that he read that Bernie Taupin had an upbeat song in mind when he wrote the lyrics, but when Elton John read the Brian Wilson reference in the chorus, it inspired him to approach the song as the mid-tempo ballad we get on the album. Going back to episode 224, Cool Stuff 26 on the Road, I mentioned I was surprised to find a track called Jamaica Ska on Annette's 1964 album Bikini Beach, which has a backing track that sounds pretty credibly like a ska record. Both Friendly 76 and Robert Zastro let me know that Annette had done a version of the song with Fishbone in the 1987 beach party parody reunion movie Back to the Beach. You can find a clip of it here on YouTube. I'd seen the movie before, but at the time I had no idea that the song was a remake of something Annette had originally recorded in 1964. It's a lot of fun, and knowing that history makes it a lot better. The recording also appeared on the Back to the Beach soundtrack album. When I was looking for the performance with Fishbone, I also came across a clip of Annette doing the song with Bob Hope. It seems to be from the Chrysler Presents a Bob Hope Thanksgiving special, which aired on November 20th, 1964. Oddly, the bit starts with Bob asking Annette to do something from her new Pajama Party album, when Jamaica Ska, of course, is on Bikini Beach. Maybe nobody was keeping track. More likely, I imagine, they decided the song would be fun to do with Bob, but also wanted to give a plug for Annette's new album, so they didn't worry about it. As you might guess, the television orchestra plays it more like a gentle mambo than the actually quite ska arrangement of the original. Bob Hope plays it for laughs, doing silly dance moves and occasionally grunting while Annette sings it. There's also a video of Annette performing the song live in 1990, where she introduces it as being from Back to the Beach. Maximum NPP, also known as Nathan, let me know about another surprisingly early ska-influenced number called Do the Jellyfish, written and performed by Neil Sedaka and featured in the ultra-low-budget horror movie Sting of Death, released in October 1966. I was disappointed to discover that Neil Sedaka does not appear in the movie. Instead, the teenagers play the record while twisting by the pool, all the while somehow unaware that the monster is lurking in the pool right at their feet. I thought I knew pretty much every bad horror movie made in the 60s, but this one had completely escaped my notice. I've only watched the one scene, but from what I can tell, it's so low budget as to practically be a home movie. I'd love to know how they got Neil Sedaka involved. As far as I can tell, Do the Jellyfish was never actually released on a record until some novelty compilations decades later. The movie actually looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to try to check it out. Thanks, Nathan, for letting me know about that. In that same episode, I also mentioned that I had tickets to see the Mike and Bruce show in Auburn Hills, Michigan on July 5th. The show was pretty much what we've come to expect in recent years. I had the impression that the performance was a little sloppier than it had been. Not outrageously so, but not quite as tight as in prior years. That might be because John Stamos was present and seemed to have carte blanche to wander anywhere on and off stage at will. It might also have been because, though I was sitting near the same spot I was last year, the sound at this particular venue was much worse this year. When the group first took the stage, it was obvious they were having some technical difficulties. The sound improved a little, but throughout, from where I was sitting, there was a constant loud, low thrumming sound underneath everything. As always, their performance of God Only Knows was highly effective at making me miss Carl's vocal. I was surprised there was no mention of Dennis at all, even in the introduction to John Stamos performing Forever. Even with those caveats, I always enjoy the opportunity to hear those songs live, and I hope they'll be back this way next summer. If you saw Mike and Bruce this summer, I hope you'll pass along your thoughts on the show. Back in episode 235, U.S. Pop Culture 1969 Part 7, I showed the elaborate packaging of John and Yoko's wedding album, which led Chris Marzoli to pose the question, are there other albums where the packaging outshines the record? One that I could think of, and I'm not exactly sure that this really counts, is the Rolling Stones fan club package, which was available in record stores in 1983. In it, you got a badge, a fan club membership card, some temporary tattoos to tattoo you, a facsimile press pass from the Hyde Park concert in 1969, a bunch of postcards of various tour posters over the years, some biographical information on the band done up as passports, and I thought it was interesting when it came to Bill Wyman, across his date of birth, they put a cigarette to mask the fact that he was older than the rest of the members of the band, I'm sure. Not very subtle, really. There was a giant poster of album covers. Color 8x10 portraits of each member of the band. A Welcome to the Rolling Stones fan club letter by Bill Wyman. A facsimile of a 1963 letter by Brian Jones. A couple of additional merch flyers. And the reason I think this might count, a record with interviews of the band. Now, I'm not sure that this is a package with a record in it or a record with really good packaging? I'll let you decide on that. Can anybody think of any other records where the packaging is much better than the record itself? I'll leave you with that thought. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for all the great comments. I wish I could have gotten to more of them. I really appreciate all the insights, information, and perspectives, and the often very hilarious comments and stories that come in. Again, if you're not reading the comments section on these episodes, you're really missing out. Next time, I hope to begin winding up our series on featuring Carl Wilson. I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks very much for watching. Please hit like if you don't mind. Subscribe if you haven't. Have a great week. Hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye.